Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. It's really fantastic to see such a broad range of events happening for 16 days, and I'm really glad to be able to contribute a little bit to to that discussion. So in my role in the Improvement Service, I largely work with local authorities who are looking to embed children's rights, and in particular looking at the UNCRC legislation that came into force in Scotland. And when I'm doing that work, I regularly ask people to think about, excuse me, the children and young people that they work directly or indirectly with in their service or in their community, and to think about whose rights are most at risk or who's furthest from their rights. And one of the groups of children and young people that people often talk about are those who have experienced gender-based violence. And concerned about how that's framed for them and the consideration of rights within that context. But also when you talk to children and young people, they're really concerned with issues around violence and misogyny. So what I wanted to do today was to share a little bit more of a children's rights lens to some of that work, but in particular to talk to you about the legislation in Scotland and what that means for local authorities as well. So if we move on to the next slide, please, Samantha. Thank you. Human rights, and I'm sure that most of you in some context or in some space have heard about human rights. And essentially, human rights are concerned with the core fundamental things that allow us to live happy, safe, healthy, and fulfilled lives. And they're very much founded in concepts such as fairness, equality, and dignity. And right across Britain, we've had a long history and tradition around ensuring that human rights are part of the fabric of law in Britain. In Scotland, there's been a particular focus in the last few years on children's rights and a desire to see a culture where children's rights are embedded into the work that we do right across society. So the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child is an international human rights treaty. And it is the most widely and most rapidly ratified human rights treaty in history, signalling its significance and importance for children and young people. So children and young people have human rights, but they also have this additional set of rights that is outlined in the UNCRC, and that contains civil, political, economic, social and cultural rights, and it provides that protection to all children and young people up to the age of 18. In that sense, it's very comprehensive, and if read in its totality, gives a real strength and foundation to the rights of children and young people. One of the most special and unique things about the UNCRC is that it recognises that children and young people are vulnerable because of their age and status and reliance on others to provide for them. So it recognises that need for special protection. But at the same time, it also elevates children and young people into a distinct set of rights holders. And in doing that, it gives them status. And as a result of that status and that allowance to have a voice in decisions that affect them, it moves children and young people away from just being passive objects of care and to charity into being rights holders themselves. If you get a chance to read the UNCRC and the preamble to that, it sets out a context for children's rights, that children and young people should grow up in an environment of happiness, of love and understanding. And that premise is really special and an unusual thing to see in something like a formal treaty document. But in Scotland, it has set the context for other really big programmes of work like the Promise and GIRFEC that many of you are probably very familiar with as well. And in that and holding that premise of happiness, love and understanding, we can really set a children's rights lens onto something like violence against women and girls and see that experience of violence against women and girls for children and young people is a breach of their rights and something that is unacceptable for them. So next slide, please, Santa. Thank you. So the UNCRC expresses the rights of children and young people through a set of articles, and it may at first seem a bit overwhelming to think about all 54 articles, but it is possible to group the articles of the UNCRC into 3 different areas. The first one being around provision. So those services that provide for the needs of children and young people, such as health and shelter, education and survival needs. We can also see a grouping of rights around protection, so protection from all forms of harm and abuse, but also exploitation and things like harmful substances. And the third one is around participation, and we'll come back to talk a little bit more about participation, I think, right throughout the session today. But the participation rights are all about that active agency and voice in their own lives and in society more broadly as well. So thinking about rights in terms of these three categories allow us to, I suppose, place the work that we're doing across these different categories and locate the work we're doing to uphold children's rights within that framework, but also to help to encourage those who are maybe less familiar with children's rights to explain to them how the work that they're doing may be contributing to upholding children's rights as well. So next slide, please, Sandra. So in children's rights work that we do, we also often talk about taking a children's rights-based approach. And this is really about putting those rights into practice. On the screen, we can see what we call the 4 general principles of the UNCRC. And working with these 4 general principles in all of the work that we do across policy and practice help us to really embed a children's rights-based approach. So we want to always be thinking about the best interests of the child or young person as a key consideration in the decisions that we're taking. We want to take a non-discriminatory approach. We want to be really thinking about the right to survival and development of the child, and particularly that development piece is quite broad ranging in terms of the work that public bodies do. And finally, that children's participation, Article 12, which we'll talk about again. Also on the screen, it should maybe pop up, but if it doesn't, the word dignity is here, and dignity is very fundamental to any human rights-based approach and how we put this into practice. And we can see that those who really embed their work in a children's rights-based approach place a huge value on dignity. And the dignity of a child is often overlooked when designing adult services, and we're thinking about how we work with them and not necessarily about the dignity of the child or young person. So next slide, please, Sandra. I thought it'd be useful today to look at some of the UNCRC articles themselves, and I don't want to go through all of them. But I think when we think about violence against women and girls and the impact of that on children and young people, we can immediately think about those protection rights that are outlined in the UNCRC around being protected from being hurt or badly treated, the protection from dangerous drugs, thinking about those protection services in terms of keeping you safe with your family, or if you can't live with your family, to the right to live somewhere safe. But I think what the UNCRC also does is encourage us to think about the impact more broadly on some of the other rights of children and young people that might be affected by their experience of abuse. So, for example, a child or a young person who has to flee their home, for example, is also at risk of not being able to access the right to education, the right not to be able to access rest and play, so leaving behind toys and comforts, not being able to have friends around to your house, not being able to meet your friends, all impacting on that Article 31, the right to rest and play. They may be moved away from services that they've used before, so impacting on things like the right to health, access to dental services and GP services, for example. So the UNCRC articles provide a really good way for us to see kind of the broad impact of gender-based violence right across the life of a child or a young person, and to understand the impact that it can have in terms of realisation of those rights. And one of the things that the UNCRC legislation does in Scotland, and we can touch on that a little bit more, is that it applies to all services and that are provided by a local authority or any other public body, and those that are offered through procured or commissioned services as well. And in doing that, it strengthens the protection that children and young people have. But also, I think there's a tendency to think about children's rights only in terms of education and children's services, and to not look beyond that, whereas the UNCRC legislation requires us to think about children's rights in the context of housing, in terms of planning and placemaking, other things like transport also coming into play as well. So a really strong lens for us to look broadly at the impact for children and young people. So next slide, please. I wanted to touch just on Article 12, the voice of the child, and I won't say too much about this because I think others will have a lot more important things to say. But the Article 12 is very fundamental to the UNCRC and that right to be listened to and to be taken seriously. But we're often asked what the parameters of that are for children and young people. And the UNCRC talks about evolving capacities. And in doing that, it really talks about the ability of children and young people to be able to make reasoned decisions in different parts of a child's life as they grow and mature with age, but also with circumstances. And not all children and young people will have the same capacity at the same age or in the same space. And it's really important to take that into account when thinking about the voice of the child, but also to think about how that capacity might relate to the environment in which you're working and in terms of which rights you're talking about as well. One of the things that Cathy McCulloch, who's the director of the Children's Parliament, would say when talking about Article 12 is that it's really important to remember that children and young people are experts in their own lives. And I think that's a really important kind of words to remember when we're thinking about Article 12 and the importance of that, regardless of the age of the child. So just moving on, and we'll maybe skip the next slide because it's quite technical, but just very, very quickly to say that the UNCRC talks about some inherent obligations around progressive realisation, and that's around the requirement for states to take what they call continuous and purposeful steps forward in terms of the realisation of children's rights. There isn't an expectation that we will do this immediately, but it does set some parameters for that. And I can certainly kind of answer some more questions on that if people want more information, but I put the slides in because it'd be useful. So next slide, please, Sandra. So looking specifically at the UNCRC Scotland Act 2024, this legislation came into effect on the 16th of July this year. So we've just had a few months where it's been enforced, but the Act has been long anticipated and has had significant amount of children and young people championing the legislation coming into force. And the intention behind the legislation is to deliver what they describe as a proactive culture of everyday accountability for children's rights across public services in Scotland. And the legislation seeks to do this in two ways. So the first way is to strengthen children's rights through the Scottish legal system. So children and young people can now take legal cases if they feel their rights are being breached in Scotland. And secondly, by placing duties on public authorities like health boards and local authorities to respect and protect children's rights in all of the work that they do. So next slide, please. So the duties on public bodies, the key one is that local authorities and other public bodies have a duty not to act incompatibly with the UNCRC, and all functions of a public nature are covered by this legislation that are, I suppose, devolved to Scotland under Acts of the Scottish Parliament. So there are some gaps in the legislation, but also the legislation provides that any new legislation that's developed in Scotland will need to comply with the UNCRC. So that duty to act compatibly will strengthen over time and places a significant responsibility on public bodies to act in a proactive manner. At national level, we'll also see a children's rights scheme published by Scottish ministers, and that will be their annual plan to report on steps that they will take to further implement children's rights, and will include things like children's participation and raising awareness of rights, children's rights budgeting, complaints mechanisms, and lots more besides. And public bodies, again, will have to report on the actions that they're taking to give further effect to the UNCRC, cutting across all service areas. And those first reports will be due in March 2026. So while public bodies previously had to report on what they were doing around children's rights under the Children in Scotland Act 2014, there was no duty to have a forward look to that plan. So under the new legislation, they will need to report what they're doing, but also what they plan to do. So it does have that forward look, and that presents a real opportunity for local authorities to look ahead at some of the emerging issues for children and young people, and the issues that they're talking about in terms of their experience of rights at local level as well. So a really good opportunity there to include violence against women and girls in those reports going forward. Next slide, please. In terms of the protection of children and young people's rights through the court system, they have until the age of 18 years of age to raise a complaint. So there's no legal time limits on those proceedings. And ultimately, it will be up to the courts to decide if the law follows the UNCRC. Help and support for children and young people will be available through the Children and Young People's Commissioner's Office, who can intervene and support a case if they feel that there's rights aren't being protected. And you can find more information around the parameters of that on their website as well. But the courts will hold significant power to tell organisations to change what they're doing if they feel that they have not upheld a child's rights properly. So at the moment, we haven't seen any cases come to this stage in proceedings yet in Scotland, but I think over the next few months and years, we'll see more case law emerging that is focused on the experience of children's rights in Scotland. Next slide, please. So in terms of putting this into practice, then, I mean, I could talk for hours about doing that, but some really key things that public bodies really need to focus on. And first and foremost is that proactive approach to children's rights and compliance with the UNCRC. And to do that, we need to see real leadership commitment across organisations on the rights and the importance of children experiencing their rights across all local authority and other public bodies services. And we can see some local authorities who have really invested in that leadership piece and have really engaged with services that are not traditionally associated with children and young people, getting them to understand their contribution to upholding children's rights. We want to see a real focus on the participation and empowerment of children and young people. So children and young people learning about their rights through rights respecting schools and other programmes of work as well. And the ability to know and understand your rights is really key in terms of being able to access them and to challenge adults to uphold your rights as well. We also need to see awareness raising and knowledge of children's rights across organisations and across workforces. We want to see a lot more child-friendly information. So how can children and young people know about their rights and to be able to find information about a range of services that they might need. We want to see child-friendly complaints processes in Scotland where we can see children being able to raise issues around their experience of rights, and we can see some guidelines around that from the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman as well. And there's lots more, and we're very happy to share more information around that as well. So the next slide, please. Thank you. So just very quickly, I don't want to spend too much time thinking or talking about this, but you can see the UNCRC threaded through lots of programmes of work that where we can see children and young people being further from their rights. And I hope that some of the information we talked about earlier will help you to navigate a children's rights lens across some of those areas of work. And we've got some resources in the improvement service that will really help with that as well. Next slide, please. So just very briefly, we've got a range of tools and resources that we use with local authorities to support them to navigate their way through the new legislation and to think about how to apply that in their organisation. And there's lots of links there. There's web resources to learn more about the UNCRC and a specific version of that information for elected members as well. And we've got various policy papers on there as well. So the next slide has some contact details. So please get in touch if you're looking for some help and support, or just have a look around our webpage and our Knowledge Hub group as well, if you'd like any more information as well. But I'll hand back to Joanna.
Hello. Happy to be able to contribute to this event. I would apologize for not being able to do it live, but I'm actually on my way as you are speaking to each other to meet my new grandson, so I'm not really sorry. Anyway, but I hope it goes very well. And I would just like to mark, obviously, because today is now the third of the 16 days of activism, that everything we do in the 16 days is based on the work of the women who went before us and the children who went before us, especially in the women's aid movement, and the women who around their kitchen tables made plans that eventually have changed Scotland. So big shout out to those folk. Big shout out to the folks who are now working so hard, including those in the improvement service and elsewhere, to carry on that work. So Scottish Women's Aid has recently refreshed our strategic plan. And as part of that, we took a look at what our critical priorities were going to be going forward for the next few years. And we've always talked about the harm, the risk, the violations of human rights involved in civil processes around child contact and domestic abuse in Scotland. We've had campaigns on it. I mean, over the last few decades, God knows how many hours have been spent working on it, talking to officials, talking to parliamentarians, talking to social workers, talking to sheriffs, talking to everybody. And yet, on reflection, as we were doing our strategic plan, we realized that despite all of those things, absolutely, really, nothing has changed. And we see on a daily basis, we see just absolute violations of children's and women's human rights to be safe from abuse, but also to be safe from state-generated abuse, which is what our civil processes actually amount to. So, but I want to start this with the stories of real women and real children and what this looks like. So I'm going to share 3 case studies with you. They were collected within the space of 2 weeks last winter when I was writing a chapter with Jen Ang. And we have countless case studies like these that come in through our helpline, that have come in through our services, and that we've been hearing about, as I said, for decades. Needless to say, the details around this and the names have been changed to protect the women. So Fiona had custody of her 3, excuse me for reading, but I don't want to get it wrong. Fiona had custody of her 3 children, 2 boys, aged 5 and 9, and a girl from a former marriage. She lost custody of her eldest, the girl from the former marriage, when Darren, her abusive ex-husband, was convicted of abusing the child, a Schedule I offense. Fiona struggled to find a legal aid lawyer to represent her when Darren, subsequent to his conviction for domestic abuse, sued for contact with the 2 younger boys. She finally hired a private lawyer because she couldn't get legal aid, a legal aid lawyer. And she says that she often has to choose between buying shoes for her boys or booking an appointment with the lawyer. Fiona was getting support from a specialist domestic abuse service, and the children were being supported by trained children's support workers, so our children's workers. When Fiona requested no contact with Darren, the boys met separately with the sheriff at the sheriff's request, and both explained that they didn't want to see Darren and that they were really very afraid of him. Despite their wishes, the sheriff then awarded Darren unsupervised contact with the 2 younger boys, despite his conviction for a Schedule I offense with the previous child, with the older child. And despite his domestic abuse conviction and despite convictions for stalking and assault. The older boy told his teacher that his father was abusing him and threatening to assault his younger brother if the older one didn't cooperate. Police were called and removed the older boy from the father's home during a visit, leaving the younger child, who was then assaulted by Darren. Lorraine has 2 boys, ages 4 and 11. Lorraine reports that her husband, Chris, was abusing her. She reports this to the police. And during the trial, Subsequently, obviously, she discovers that Chris has committed serious crimes before she met him, including convictions for domestic abuse, sexual assault, and several serious other assaults. Chris is convicted of domestic abuse in her case and sentenced to community service. Lorraine flees to a refuge. Chris sues for contact. Lorraine, again, not able to find a legal aid solicitor or afford a private solicitor, represents herself. Chris has a lawyer who suggests in court that Lorraine is, quote, maliciously poisoning the children against their father, unquote, and that is why they say they are afraid of him. The court orders weekly visits to be supervised by Lorraine, despite the domestic abuse conviction. And the sheriff tells Lorraine, try putting your children's needs first for a change, especially if she wants to keep custody of the children. Lorraine calls the police during one of the visits because Chris has become verbally abusive at her and the boys and threatened, and this is such a common mantra, to take the children and go to England. They go to various places in these threats. The police remove Chris and warn Lorraine that he is a danger to the children. Lorraine then requests an end to contact the court and the court orders supervised visits at a contact center. Lorraine takes the boys to these visits. To two of them, the boys both resist spending time with their father, and the younger boy vomits outside the contact center. He is so anxious and so afraid. Contact center staff tell the boys that there are presents for them in the room with their father in order to get them to attend. Both boys have started wetting the bed at night, and Lorraine eventually refuses to take the children to contact, and while the police are advising her that Chris is a danger to her and the children. Lorraine is ordered by the court to resume visits and is found in contempt multiple times, including being sentenced to a jail term. Jillian has been divorced from Frank for 10 years. She has a daughter, now 13, and a son, 9. Frank was convicted of domestic abuse and granted supervised visitation with the daughter. Jillian, despite the conviction of domestic abuse, was asked to supervise visits. Clearly, what we have here is an assumption that somehow a violent and abusive man is no danger to his children, despite the fact that he has been convicted of violent and abusive behaviors. Due to abusive behaviors during the visits, contact was soon changed to professional supervision, and the case was referred to the Children's Panel, which decided that no contact should occur. However, Frank is allowed to appeal that decision every 3 months, which he does. And Jillian has to tell and retell the history of his abuse and of her and her daughter's trauma repeatedly to panel members and in court. Twice, the court reveals her home address inadvertently, and Jillian has to flee her home and move into a refuge in a different area of the country to get away. Jillian has lost 2 jobs. She's had to go on benefits and declare herself and her child homeless in her fight to protect herself and her daughter. Frank has used social media to stalk them, at one point offering money for information about their whereabouts. These case studies, I wish I could tell you that these case studies were the worst of the worst, and they are not. And they are just common in Scotland. What do we think of the key drivers? Well, there's clearly the key driver that a man can be a good enough father and safe for visit and nurturing and all the things that, or even some of the things we want fathers to be, despite having been abusive, and that we should assume that he can be a good enough father until proved otherwise. We also have unspoken, but very live assumptions that that joint custody is good for children and that it should be ordered unless there are overriding reasons not to. That is not supported in the evidence about outcomes for children in joint custody cases, even without domestic abuse, where there's high conflict. My theory on all of this is that this all stems from really patriarchal, historical understandings that children are essentially the possessions of their fathers, just like their mothers were for a very long time. So, and there's been lots of research that has identified this implicit assumption and how it operates. We also have a really inadequate, despite so much work and training with all sheriffs and judges on the new domestic abuse law and coercive control. We have really inadequate understandings in courts, in court staff, in child welfare reporters, in social workers, bless them, of the impact of domestic abuse, of the dynamics of it and what it looks like, and of the dangers and risks of child contact. And we have a really serious problem, and this is probably one of the things that would be easiest to fix, of the gap between what happens in a criminal case and what is evidence that's carefully laid out by the procurator fiscal about the behaviors of the perpetrator, and the lack of any formal mechanism for that information getting into the civil processes. We have a number of ideas for how that gap can be closed. We remember that there was a commitment to closing that gap in the original discussions with officials about the pending domestic abuse bill, which was passed in 2018. And yet nothing has changed. I suspect that you could easily identify the failure of the state to intervene in this situation as torture under the way the United Nations defines torture. I suppose it doesn't matter. But what does matter is that all of us find some ways to register our concern, to support people who are trying to change this, and to fix our own systems. So one of the big ways we can fix our systems, I think, is by a robust implementation and support for safe and together approaches. I think social workers need the tools that Safe and Together offer for their reports to courts and to children's panels. And we all know the evidence about how much better those reports are when a social worker has the support and training that Safe and Together offers. I also think that there are mechanisms that we can try in Scotland for one family, one sheriff, for instance, to make sure that what happens in this criminal case is fed into the civil considerations. There are so many things we could be doing to address this situation and to help children and women feel safe or after post-separation. So we know that post-separation abuse and harm are deeply harmful and chilling for women's interest and ability to report abuse, and that the idea of child contact, of social work and child protection engagement when there are children is a big barrier to women feeling like the system will be on their side, will believe them, and will help keep them safe. Please engage with the Scottish Women's Aid's Still Not Safe contact 16 days campaign. This is not going to be the end of our work on child contact, it's just the beginning. And we're in this. This campaign goes until the situation is changed. Thanks very much for listening to me. And I'm just checking to see how much time I've spent. I forgot to start the timer. I hope this is okay. Please have a great rest of your session. And I'm at Scottish Women's Aid. If you have any comments or questions, please just get in touch. Thanks, and I'll say hi to the folks in Nashville for you.
Thank you very much for this fantastic opportunity to share the experience and knowledge that I've gained over the last 6 years of being West Lothian's Children's Rights Court Contact Officer for children with an experience of domestic abuse and coercive control. I'm currently funded by the Whole Family Wellbeing Fund, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank all the children and young people, their families, my colleagues in West Lothian Council, sheriffs, Scottish Courts Tribunal Service, West Lothian family law firms, social work, domestic abuse, sexual assault teams, and West Lothian's Women's Aid, and our gender-based violence lead officer for working alongside me since June 2018, because you cannot do this job alone. All the information that I'm going to share with you today has been given to me by consent of children and young people that I work with, and that's because they want to keep you adults up to date. So next slide, please. So the origins of the post comes from incredible work, pioneering work in 2016. The Children and Young People's Commissioners, Scottish Women's Aid, and 27 young experts got together to look at a project about child welfare hearings in Scotland. They wanted to look at the justice in child contact. This can be found on the Children and Young People's Commissioners website and also Scottish Women's Aid website and on YouTube. They've done fantastic work there, and there's also a booklet that you can get that I use on a weekly basis. So the story is Zane and Mia and their dog and their mum and dad and their continued experience of domestic abuse despite separation, and they're often very hurt and confused feelings. The first part of the story, the children don't feel understood or heard by the decisions that the sheriffs make, and it's not working very well for them. So our young experts decided that these children needed a super listener, and this is where Grace was created, and she's the court advocacy worker specifically for children and child welfare hearings when they've had an experience of domestic abuse. Next slide, please. Here's Grace, our super listener. And this is the model that we took forward, which has now been the Child Contact Rights Officer. So Grace, as you can see, she's got all the expertise and time and awareness of issues around trauma, separation and loss, abuse, child development, childhood mental health and well-being, and importantly, how to communicate with all ages and capacities that children have. She respects that children are unique and come with their own experiences. And importantly, they are young experts. And they are her boss, because without them, Grace wouldn't exist. Next slide, please. Alongside this, I came on board in June 2018. I am a children and families social worker, and I was given the opportunity on secondment to progress this role 3 days a week, and 2 days a week I was social working. As I was doing that, we were also part of Improving Justice and Child Contact, which you'll find on the University of Edinburgh website. It was a phenomenal piece of research that was done with other countries, Bulgaria, Cyprus, Portugal, and Romania. And each country brought forward their own model for justice and child contact. And I'm really pleased to say that 2 of the nations have taken on the super listener role as their preferred model. Next slide, please. So how do you make referrals, and what does it look like in practice? So we have an agreement from the sheriffs in Livingston child welfare hearings that the Children's Rights Court Contact Officer myself, I can provide the verbatim views of children for child welfare hearings. This post is a children's rights post. It sits separate and independent from other areas of social work or court or justice. And we uphold the UNCRC Implementation Act and Children's Scotland Act 1995 and the recent 2020. The current referral criteria is that children have a child welfare hearing in Livingston Sheriff Court, that they have a lived experience of domestic abuse and coercive control, No conviction is required. It's that the family are known to have experienced this, and particularly the child is known to have experienced it. And the child is subject to a live child welfare hearing. This is very important because all the views are to go direct to the sheriff. And if we don't have a live child welfare hearing, then the views can't go anywhere. And that, in a lot of ways, is more damaging to children because they've put their trust in giving and providing a view, an analysis or assessment of their lives, and then it goes nowhere. So we really do need to know that there's a child welfare hearing in process. Now, the sheriff can appoint me by interlocutor, and within that interlocutor, there can also be direction as to what needs to be discussed with the child. When that happens, the solicitor who is involved with the resident parent will then get in touch with me by email, providing me with the details of the parental address and best contact number, and also anything that's been agreed within court by the sheriff and the solicitors that I should know that will help discussions with the child. And there's also a date and a court reference number, and all the views that are given to me verbatim are written up in a letter that the child reads through and can edit and amend, and that is given by secure email to the court at least 5 days before the next child welfare hearing. It's really important that the child gets to see this process and understand it. And I often hear from children that previously, when they've had discussions with other professionals, they don't know what it's about. They don't understand where their information goes, and they also don't know what happens next. So next, also I wanted to say that in terms of meeting with children, I'll contact the resident parent first, explain my role and ask if I can come and visit them at home. Now, I think that's very important that I'm a guest in their house, so it's a bit of power dynamic. It allows the child to feel confident and comfortable with me before I then go and meet them on their own. And if the child's not able to do that for whatever reason, then I'll offer to do a video for the child, introducing myself so they can see what I look like. That's very important for children. It's really important to hear what I sound like, and I'll give them a really short introduction as to why I'm coming to meet with them and what the purpose is. It's vitally important for children to understand the process. It's vitally important that children are helped to give as clear a view and informed choice as possible, because this goes direct to the sheriff. The secure email goes to the sheriff alongside the child's consent as to who else gets to see that letter. That's been a part of the role that's come around directly from the sheriffs. I'm happy to say they recognise very quickly from some of the statements the children were given that often they would be highly concerned about who would have access to their verbatim views. So the sheriffs now ask me to gain consent from the young person, from the child. And I can work with children from the age of 4 up to 16. And it's really for me to decide if they have the capacity and understanding to provide a comprehensive view to the sheriff. And I need to do that in a way that suits the child best. Next slide, please. So, in June 2023, we felt that it was the best time to sit back and review and evaluate how successful or not we had been in this role. By October 2020, I'd managed to secure this role full-time, and we looked at the source of referrals that we had. And up to June 2023, I had taken on 399 referrals to the service. I work full-time Monday to Friday. I am the only person doing this, so I think that shows you how very busy the service has been. You'll see from the graph here that 65% of all referrals came direct from the sheriff. That was 258 referrals that I'd had since June 2018 to June 2023. You'll see that DASAT, that's our Domestic Abuse Sexual Assault team in West Lothian. They work directly with victim survivors of domestic abuse and sexual assault, and they work directly with children recovering and currently experiencing domestic abuse. They were my next biggest referrer. There was 57 referrals, which was 14%. And then parents who had heard about the role, they had referred into me, and the court agreed to appointing me, and that was 12%, so 48 times. And social work was 34 times, which was 9%. The reason that the other referral rates are quite low is because very, very quickly what we found was once family law agents understood the purpose of the role and saw how keen the courts were to accept their opportunity to have me appointed, then the court took over the majority of the referrals. So today, on the 4th of December, since the 1st of January 2024, I've submitted 51 letters of children's views to the court. So that's 51 times this year. Sheriffs in West Lothian, child welfare hearings, have had the opportunity to read the experiences of young experts who are impacted by domestic abuse, coercive control, and have contact with non-resident family members. I've also had the opportunity to provide advice and guidance and many other consultations to families and professionals. I've delivered Safe and Together training recently, and also awareness raising for children's rights, and work within our Children's Rights Network. And also we've got a care experience group called Having Your Say, which I'm part of too. And all of that enriches and informs my practice. I had a look at my spreadsheet this morning, and to date, from beginning in the middle of June 2018 to now, I've received 482 referrals to this service. This shows the credibility and the functionality of this advocacy service for children in civil courts. Next slide, please. We've heard this morning already about the UNCRC, and I am delighted to say that this service upholds and defends the rights of children. Looking specifically at the referrals, Article 12, the view and voice of the children, is so integral. And we also look at Article 19, which protects children from harm and abuse, and also Article 39, which helps recovery from that. I work in a very collaborative way. Once harm's been identified to a child, I've got a duty to then refer children on to other services, and I will do that, and I have done that. So there's been situations where children have disclosed harm and abuse, and that's gone directly as a referral to social work, or it's gone to other agencies that are already set up to help families. The courts, importantly, are now recognising from using this service that the child is an expert in their own experience. And we know that because they continue to seek their views. The service ensures the child is supported to provide their views in a really safe and trauma-informed approach. My background, as I explained to you, is children and family social work. And with that comes the understanding of child development, of trauma, of the impact of separation and loss, of the need for children to express themselves in a variety of different ways. It's always a verbatim view that's taken, and that's taken after several sessions of getting to know them and making sure that the environment is correct for them and it feels safe and secure for them to speak and talk about what they want to say. The child will always edit this, and the child will always get the final say on when it's ready to go to the sheriff. Next slide, please. So my young experts, oh my goodness, and there's so many of them. When we were doing an evaluation, it was very important that we went to them and asked them how they found the service to be. And I'm absolutely delighted that, as you can see, they liked it. We sometimes do drawings. We often talk about harm in families. We talk about their feelings. We talk about things that they like to do, things that they don't like to do during their contact, things that they would like to change about it. We look for the positives in their lives as well. As you can see, they're saying that Dawn made it easy to talk about my dad and didn't make me feel silly or wrong. There's absolutely no space for shame in this work. We need to build children's self-esteems. They have the right to feel safe and confident in every situation they're in. You can see that a lot of the children and young people are concerned about their mums, and that they wanted their mum to know that it's okay not to be like this. And what they meant by that was that they didn't like the worry, pressure and anxiety that constantly going to court promotes within the household. They were very keen to let me know that they are my boss, and I'm glad that they hold on to that, because the clue's in the title, Children's Rights Court Contact Officer. So they are my boss. I've got two bosses. They are the very important one, and the second most important one is the sheriff. Our evaluation was informed by sheriffs and children, their families, and my colleagues in West Lothian family law firms, who have all been incredibly generous and very timely in their responses. Throughout our evaluation, what came through was that children are believed. So their views were believed and given the respect that they were due. Now, that's not to say that on every occasion, every child got the contact that they had wished for, but they knew that the sheriff had read their views and that they had been taken into account. So that is so vitally important. I am not permitted to give an analysis or any kind of recommendation to the sheriff. I'm not allowed to give an assessment of risk. But in the way that I engage with children, my hope is that they are able to do that for the sheriff, that they're able to give their experience, and that the sheriff can read that very clearly and understand their perspective and how that feels for them. Because the views are verbatim, it is very much their language and their phrasing and their intonation that builds the picture for the sheriff of how that feels for that young person. I'll always act in the child's best interest, so if I see harm, I will report that in as well, and I'm bound by child protection guidelines and professional ethics, so no child or young person is ever left in a position of harm if this is discovered, and I can explain all that process to children and provide them with the next steps to keeping them informed. So next slide please. Now, in the evaluation, I also had the opportunity to ask young people what they wanted me to share in terms of letting other people know what it is we do. And this young person said to me, he gave me consent to share his story with you. And this is the Ninja Warrior story. And you know you've made it when you're gifted your own Lego Ninjago Warrior with the sabre of truth and my purple suffragette cape that was specifically designed for me. This for me is equivalent to an Oscar. This young person was 11 years old when I came into his life, and he'd been through years of social work involvement. Early in his life, he was subject to child protection meetings, and then latterly court civil contact orders. He was met with child welfare reporters. He'd been discussed in the civil child court welfare hearings for around about 4 years, and he'd given up. He did not want to meet me, and I could do nothing for him. I was the same as all the rest, trying to make him see his dad as an okay guy. His father had been in and out of his life. He was very highly critical of the child and also his mother and wider family, and he'd experienced verbal coercive control. The father had also been financially and physically abusive to his mother. The young person said he wouldn't meet with me and he felt no one listened to him anyway, so what was the point? People spoke at him, he said, and made their minds up already, so he wasn't going to go back through that again. So I asked his mum if I could FaceTime him first so he could hear and see what I looked like. And then we negotiated if there was somehow I could come and see him in person. This was a really good way for him to take control of the initial sessions. And he decided not to see me at school, but I could come to a local community centre. And he was interested in the court system and who everyone was. So we used Power Up and Power Down and materials, and we talked about what children's rights he has and how he can use them every day and everywhere. From this, he decided, yes, okay, he would like to write to the sheriff, and we explained how this whole process had left him feeling. He wanted to say how his school had been impacted, how he can't concentrate that well, how his friendships are hard for him as he's waiting for them to be nasty to him, because that's what his dad was like, sometimes nice, sometimes horrible. His nightmares made it hard to sleep, and he was worried he couldn't cope in secondary school, just because he'd only managed primary because of the relationships with his teachers, and now they were leaving him too. So we wrote his letter and he edited it, and he was happy that it should go directly to the sheriff. And from this, eventually, contact was stopped. On our final visit, he presented me with my warrior and the letter, and I'll read you the letter. It says, Dawn the Ross is a ninja warrior from the planet Lothian in the west of the galaxy, Scotland. She protects the young ones and makes their voices louder. When the young ones are down, she has a way of making them smile. With the ninja warriors at her side, she helps the young ones feel better. Now, I'm sure there's a few ninja warriors here today, and hopefully we'll find out later in the Q&As. The themes that come from working with children and young people very clearly are anxiety and uncertainty, about the responses from their parents when their parents are in court and during their contact that they have with the parent that they're not with. The majority of that time, it probably will be with their father, and these situations can re-traumatise children, and they feel like it's never getting any better. They're really worried, and they show a great deal of anguish about what might happen to their loved ones and what might happen to them. There's continual surveillance and monitoring that happens, and the abuse, even when parents have been separated for years, just continues, and it impacts on every aspect of that child's well-being. As you've heard from our ninja warrior, his school was impacted, his friendships were impacted, he had nightmares, he felt powerless. So children can be weaponised, and they can also be treated very differently. They sometimes can be given quite lavish gifts and rewards in attending contact, and then other times they're not given even the most basic of things that they're requiring. So next slide, please. We had the absolute privilege of two of our sheriffs in Livingston speaking to us about this court contact rights role, and we were incredibly and continue to be incredibly grateful for their time and attention within the interviews that were carried out, and also they very helpfully provided written submissions, and this is one of the written submissions from the sheriff. What the sheriff says is, first, it can be relatively quick. Secondly, the children's views can be obtained without expense to the parties or the legal aid fund. That is a big issue in Scotland right now, legal aid. Thirdly, in practice, the children's rights officer would, as I understand it, try and see young children on several occasions in order to build up a relationship with them before obtaining their views. This helps children feel relaxed about discussing these things with someone who might not be known to them. I think it's important that children's views are given to the court, and they're not often immediately given to parties in the case. This is the part about consent I talked to you about before. The sheriffs are absolutely understanding that and evidencing that the welfare of the child is paramount here. And this is how Children's Rights Officer carries out her function obtaining the views of children. And that's a very much more succinct example of what I do than I could ever provide. And that's why they're a sheriff and I'm a Children's Rights Officer. So you can see the credibility and the timely responses that we're able to provide to the courts. The very clear views that children provide, the young experts can give their analysis assessment themselves, and it doesn't cost anything. Next slide, please. I've also built up, I think, a really good working relationship with all the family law solicitors within West Lothian and neighbouring areas. And again, we've been very grateful for their involvement with this post, because without them, we really would not be able to function. West Lothian family law firms came back to us very, very quickly with their responses, and they either gave that in writing or they spoke directly to my manager who was undertaking this evaluation. So you can see that they're saying that it's a very quick service where children's views are given freely, and it can have an impact on decisions occurring in the court. That's so important for children to know, that what they are providing will make a difference. It does have an impact. And parents are accepting of the information. Very few times have I heard from another parent or a solicitor to say that their client or the opposing agent's client have an issue with the Children's Rights Officer getting involved, because they do understand it's about the rights of the child to be heard. And that because I'm working collaboratively with the child, it can only be to their benefit. And again, I totally appreciate and understand the perspective, and that it would be useful for them as legal representatives to have sight of the presentation of the child's views. Because they work in the best interest of their client, they're always keen to try and get some sort of agreement and limit court time, because in actual fact, they understand that this can be very harrowing for families. And also they're wanting to come away with the best outcome possible. One of the things that I would agree, and I think that there's more discussion to be had on this, was that not only should there be a court advocacy worker within the child welfare hearings, but across all civil cases. And that's something that certainly I would be open to discussing. Next slide, please. So our outcomes, incredibly positive. Children and young people are included, informed, respected and safer. The sheriffs are re-referring children to me. You've heard about my stats. I've 51 interlocutors this year. 51 times the sheriff has read the views of children in court. And from that, around about 33% of those children will be re-referred to me by the sheriffs, because there might be ongoing children's right court contact issues that the sheriff's now interested in hearing the updates on. We've also had situations where the sheriffs have asked if I could support children in considering their views on exclusion orders and on the expulsion of parental rights and responsibilities. And that is, again, another indication that the sheriffs find the role very, very credible and very supportive to children. We've had situations where contact's been altered, reduced, moved to different locations, and also stopped. It's ceased on occasions. Child welfare reporters have been appointed to investigate after the child's views have been given, because the court can hear that there's a need for further investigation. And I've worked really cooperatively with my colleagues who are child welfare reporters to help along the way in any way that I can. Sometimes that might be by, with consent from the court, sharing information that I've already got. It can be being there with the child. It can be explaining to the child who the child welfare reporter is. It can be sitting in with the child whilst they speak to the child welfare reporter. Importantly, the sheriffs are asking the child for consent to share their views, and that just did not happen before. And you can see that the process is quicker and less costly all round. It doesn't cost parents anything, it costs solicitors nothing, and it costs the Legal Aid Board zero. Next slide, please. So what do we need to do going forward? We need to keep children and young people safe in child contact when there's been domestic abuse and coercive control. That is a given, and we'll strive to do that. We need this service to be taken up by other courts and local authorities. We've evidence that it's effective and efficient in West Lothian. We need to ensure in every decision a child will be asked, Article 12 and the Children's Scotland Act as well. We know that they need to be supported to understand the process, their part in this, and what possible outcomes might be for them. And we need to really start to think about how we can become more flexible for children and creative in the ways that they want to express themselves. It shouldn't be the child fitting into our working diaries and the way that we work. It should be us meeting with children, young people, and finding ways that feel the best and most safest way to participate. Yes, next slide, please. I wanted to take you right back to the beginning, and I wanted just to give credit where it was due. Without the work of the young experts in Power Up and Power Down, I wouldn't have had the last 6 years of an incredible opportunity, and I certainly wouldn't have had the chance to speak to you today to illuminate some of the work that we've been doing. This is from the super listeners, and it was a poem that one of the young people had created at the end of Power Up, Power Down. And I just think that it's vitally important that we hold this in our minds and in our hearts as we go forward in these 16 days of ending gender-based violence. And I just also want to take the opportunity to thank everybody for doing as much as they can to highlight this, and not just through the 25th of November to the 10th of December, but every day, because that's what happens every day. People are trying to do things to keep children safe. So this is a super listener. I would like you to listen to the thoughts in my head, the thoughts and feelings that go around in my head. Sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm sad, sometimes I'm angry, sometimes I'm mad. Sometimes I'm lonely with no one to hear me. Can you listen to the feelings that scare me? Will you be my super listener when I can only talk in a whisper? Thank you all for being super listeners today. And maybe there's a few of you will recognise yourself as Ninja Warriors too. Thanks very much.
So, hi everybody, I'm from Assist. We are a domestic abuse support and advocacy service. We cover the west of Scotland. So we're working in 13 local authorities across the west of Scotland, and we cover 13 courts within that. We are a domestic abuse court advocacy service within the criminal court system. But I've got a case example to kind of discuss at the end where we have that kind of crossover and that conflict when it comes to criminal court processes trying to run alongside civil court processes. So I've been working with Assist for the last 12 years. For the last couple of years, I've been managing the Children and Young Persons Service, and I used to be a Children and Young Persons advocacy worker as well. So what I'm going to do is focus kind of primarily on the work that our Children and Young Persons Service do. We obviously do support adult victims of domestic abuse as well, but just for the purposes of this presentation, focusing on children and young people. I haven't got any slides today, sorry, but I'm happy to leave my contact details for anybody to contact me or ask me any questions, or I can send information out to anybody that would want that. So what our Children and Young Persons Service do at Assist is we support in kind of two different ways. So we support young victims of domestic abuse. So that's young victims who've experienced domestic abuse within their own relationship. And we support children who've witnessed domestic abuse at home. As I say, we are a criminal court domestic abuse advocacy service. So the kind of criteria for us referral wise is that the perpetrator of domestic abuse has been reported to the police and is going to be charged or is likely to be charged with a domestic abuse related crime, and that there's likely to be criminal court proceedings around that. when I talk about young victims and child witnesses, for us, we are funded to work at the moment with age 20 and under. So I appreciate up at kind of 18, 19, 20, it's not so much children anymore, but that's the kind of age group that we're working with just now. So with young victims of domestic abuse, a lot of the work's the same in terms of a lot of what we do as in and around the court process. It's talking to children and young people about what court will look like for them, what kind of measures and support can be put in place for them to try and make that experience better. We go to court with children and young people, so we go to criminal court trials. We can apply to be their named supporter so that we can sit in with them, you know, while they're giving evidence if that's something that they end up having to do. As well as obviously the court advocacy sides of the service, you know, we do work to the Safe Lives model of intervention. We're doing risk assessments, we're doing safety planning with children, with young people, depending on their age and stage and depending on what the situation is and what kind of contact there is there with the perpetrator. So it's very much and it depends, you know, every kind of family that comes through to us or every couple can look different. We're always respecting what we're an advocacy service, we're always respecting what their views are. We always want to hear what it is they've got to say about their own personal situations. And that's something that we are trying to work with them around and also share with other services to make sure that other services understand and appreciate where that's coming from. So I suppose just to kind of run through how it would look in terms of, you know, from point of referral to, you know, our ongoing work with somebody. What I should kind of start with is we are supposed to be a short to medium term, more at that kind of, you know, something's just happened, we get involved, it's kind of at the point of crisis and then going through that criminal justice system. We are no longer a short to medium term support service with the way that the criminal justice system now is. We're supporting people for years at a time while they go through these court cases, which, you know, had started to take quite a long time anyway, and then COVID's significantly impacted on that as well. So our referrals will come from the police primarily, but we do take referrals from anybody. We can take self-referrals, we can take referrals from social workers, court services, you know, just wherever they come from. That referral comes through to us and we make contact with somebody, and first and foremost it's a check-in around what's the risk, what's the safety, do you know, what is it that we need to kind of do immediately, and just depending on what's happening with criminal court at that point. So is it still a police investigation? Is there any, you know, criminal court actually happening yet? We look to explain to somebody exactly what that all means. So if it's still sitting with the police, what that means and what's going to happen next or what's likely to happen next. If it's already at court, we explain exactly what's happening there and what's likely to happen next. Can't make any promises, obviously, in terms of what way things are going to go, but we can kind of talk about all the different outcomes to help people understand. We can share information with COPFS, so we've got a route to do that and a report that we sort of made with them so that we can share the right information with them about somebody's views. So that includes views from the children as well. So if we've got children that are involved in a criminal court case, we can share their views over to COPFS to say how they feel. And what we'll always kind of aim to put in there is what contact agreements are already in place to try and stop potentially coming from the defence side, you know, a different story maybe about what's actually happening there, just to make sure that COPFS, when they're making decisions about orders and bail conditions and outcomes, that they have the right information about what's happening with the children. And that's really important, and how the children actually feel about it. So for us to work with a child witness of domestic abuse, we also need to be working with the adults. So young victims, no matter what age they are, I would say our youngest victim of domestic abuse we've had through has probably been about 12. And what the abuse that we see coming from young perpetrators is really, really violent just now, you know, from a very young age. So for young victims, probably about 12, as I say, up to 20. For child witnesses, no matter what age they are, we have to have the parent as well, so the non-abusive parent that we're working with, or caregiver, or, you know, however the scenario looks. We're working with that adult. They'll have an offer to the children's service for support to be given to their child or young person. That's when we can get involved. the youngest child witness that we've probably worked with. So this is a child who's cited to give evidence at criminal court is 5. I think we've actually once had a 4-year-old come through as well, but that didn't end up going anywhere. We've had to advocate at times to say, if a child is really too young and we're speaking to them and we know, that it's just not something that's going to go well in criminal court, I've had to advocate to say, like, I don't know if this is going to be actually the right thing to do here, to have this child coming in. There's lots of different ways that children can give evidence at court, from, not actually having to go into a criminal court building. There's remote sites that can be used, lots of different things that can happen, but you do get to a certain point sometimes with age and stage where it's just not appropriate. And one of the other issues we have with that as well is that I think sometimes it's not so much of an issue just now, but it was an issue for a long time for us, where we would have police telling parents that children wouldn't have to go to criminal court if they'd done a joint interview with police and social work. So that's how they give their statement to the police. If it's a younger child, they'll give an interview to police and social work to say what happened, that's their evidence. And they were told that that video would be played in a criminal court, so your child won't be cited, they won't have to come to court and give evidence. Now that's not true. So any child or young person who does a joint interview can be cited to court. It tends to be less questioning, but it's something that definitely happens. And we do see children and young people being cited into criminal court to give evidence all the time. They're often always the only other person that's been there, the only other person that's seen what happened, and can have really valuable information as long as they're supported in the right way and it's the right thing for them to go through that process. One of obviously the big problems is that it takes such a long time. So we can be back and forward with children and young people at court several times. They can go to court and sit there all day and then be told, this isn't happening today for whatever reason, we're not organised, we've run out of time, we don't have all the information we need, whatever it is, sent away, you have to come back again in another 2 months. And that we've seen that happen repeatedly over and over again. And this is where court cases involving child witnesses are supposed to be prioritised, so they should be the first ones taken, but it's not what we're seeing. So often we're trying to share obviously a child's voice within that to say, this is how it's impacting on them. We're having to leave school constantly. Peers are asking where they're going, what's happening, they're missing things. We had a child just there, child aged 8, cited for Christmas Eve. To go in to give evidence at criminal court, which is thankfully just been moved, but not because it was Christmas Eve and it was an 8-year-old child, but because of a criminal court process, as something isn't ready for them to go ahead. So thankfully they found out before the day, and we didn't have them going there on the day. But that is the kind of thing that we're constantly dealing with. We've had children, young people cited on birthdays, in and around Christmas time, when there's something important happening at school. And when that's just happening repeatedly, that's obviously really difficult. So unfortunately, we don't have a lot of control over that. All we can do when we're speaking to children and young people is try to prepare them for what's going to happen. So a lot of that is that it can take quite a lot of time. This is who's going to be there. So depending on age and stage, we've got different ways of being able to talk about criminal court and how that looks to children and young people. So who's going to be there? We've got a list of questions that children and young people have given to us to say, this is the types of things that I think about and this is what I'm worried about when I go to court. So we explore that with every child and young person that we speak to, just to say, I'm worried about going to the toilet, I'm worried I'm going to be shouted at, I'm worried that a sheriff's going to have a hammer and they're going to be banging it off the desk, because that's what I've seen happen on television. So our role is to explore any worries and concerns that are there and try as best as possible to ease those, whether that's us asking, for measures or, whatever it is that we can from the court, or just offering reassurance that that's not actually what's going to happen and this is what will happen. I'd love to say that we can offer really definite promises about how it looks across 13 different courts. We absolutely can't. They all tend to deal with things a wee bit differently. We get different responses from different sheriffs, from different court staff. It kind of, again, it depends. So we are careful, that we're not promising anything that might not actually happen or might not turn out that way. our work with children and young people is very much about them, their world, you know, what's important to you. For some children, they want to, you know, have ongoing contact with the perpetrator, if it's their dad, if it's a step parent, you know, whoever that is to them. And some of them really, really don't, you know, and they're really frightened, and there's safety planning that needs to be done in and around that. And the kind of same goes for going to criminal court to give evidence, as we have children who are terrified to do that, absolutely terrified, don't want to do it. Whether that's because they're just terrified of the thought of having to speak to somebody they don't know, they're terrified of the building they have to go to, or they're terrified of the consequences. And that's not always fear of what might happen to them or to their mum, or I'm saying mum, sorry, just because that's kind of the way that we most often see it. But sometimes that just can be fear of what happens if I say something and then my dad, if it ends up going to jail. Or, you know, what if I cause something to happen by what I say? So those fears can come in lots of different ways. But what we have on the kind of flip side to that is children and young people who want to do it. And it's really important to them to have their voice heard, and they feel that they've seen something or they've heard something important, and that it's important for them to go and talk about it, and they want that opportunity to do that. You know, and some children and young people do really well going and giving evidence in criminal court because of that as well, because it's something that they feel that they need the opportunity to be able to do that. What can be interesting is when we've got multiple children in a family, some of them can be cited and sometimes others aren't, and that can be quite difficult, because the ones that aren't cited will say, well, why am I not going? Because I've got important information as well, I've got something that I want to say. Especially if they've spoken to the police but then not been told they need to go to court, you know. So children and young people come through to us, and, you know, so many different sort of needs, you know, the way they feel about things, that just can present in so many different ways, and not always what you would expect, you know, for what the situation they're in is. The example that I was going to talk about, and I've got consent from mum to share this. It's something that's been going on for quite a long time, and she's happy for this to be talked about. So this actually goes back to when I was working as a children and young persons worker, and I still have contact with this mum now, just because of how this case has went. So there was a young boy that I met as a children and young persons worker when he was 7 years old. So mum was working with the service with an adult advocacy worker, and her son came through to us, a 7-year-old, as a child witness of domestic abuse. So is going to be cited in this criminal court case. So this criminal court case started back in 2019. The perpetrator in the court case is not this 7-year-old's biological father, but he is biological father to another sibling who's 5. So in discussions, I hear that 7-year-old, the child that I'm supporting, has not had any contact with this perpetrator since he was 5 years old. So the court case starts, there's bail conditions, but they only prevent contact with mum and from going to the address. So there's no bail conditions specifically covering the children. So what sort of kick-starts alongside this process is a civil court process. So this is something that, to be honest, I have only seen this one time in my whole 12 years of doing this work, but it was just astonishing to me that it was something that could actually happen. So the perpetrator starts a civil court process for contact with both children. So despite not having any contact, you know, with the 7-year-old, who's not his biological child since he was 5, has started this process to have contact. And the sheriff agreed that that should happen with both children in a contact centre. So the criminal court case has just disposed last month, I think. That's how long that's been going on for. So we had around a 5-year criminal court process there. The civil court process is still ongoing. The young person that I'm talking about, who was 7 when I met him, he absolutely didn't want any contact with this perpetrator. Neither did the younger brother at 5. He was getting support from a separate service. So neither wanted contact, absolutely terrified, had seen things happen to mum. You know, the 7-year-old's a witness in the criminal court case. Terrified to have contact, don't want it at all. We're both told several times they've got to go to this contact centre, they've got to go to this contact centre. Now we're back at, I think maybe we were maybe at criminal court about 7 times through the years. And it was adjourned, you know, on all of those occasions. So told to go and get evidence, then it gets adjourned, doesn't happen. So while that's all going on, this young person's been told, but you have to go and have contact with this person. And mum is told you have to take them, despite the bail conditions and the fact that you might see them at the contact centre, you have to take the children there, which became something that she was having to force them to do. I think it only actually worked out on maybe 2 or 3 occasions where the contact actually went ahead at the contact centre. The children were given a safe word, which they were told they could use if they felt unsafe, which they both used, and it wasn't responded to. They were also told to hug the perpetrator whilst at the contact centre, despite not having contact with them for quite a long time, you know, and that being very new for them, and also something that they didn't want to do. They were encouraged by contact centre staff to hug them, which they didn't want to do. So the young person that I was supporting at 7 is now 12, and they have finally listened, because he's 12, to the fact that he doesn't want this. He doesn't want to see this person. He doesn't want any contact with them. But that's there only been a decision now, after all of those years, that he doesn't have to be involved in that process anymore. The 5-year-old, who's now 10, that's still ongoing. Despite, if you remember what I said there, maybe about 2 or 3 times within the last 5 to 7 years, there has been contact, and this is still ongoing, and they're still not listening to these children. So a really difficult case for me, you know, working in and around that in terms of criminal court advocacy. There's not been a lot, apart from speaking to lawyers, you know, trying to talk to whoever I can about, is there anything that we can actually do here? Is there anyone that can listen to these children? Is there anyone that can put their views forward? Is there anything more that the lawyer can do that's supporting mum? It felt very, very limited, and like you were constantly meeting a wall in terms of, you know, I can do all this in and around this criminal court process, and I can help with all these things, and the criminal court are giving you this message of it isn't safe, and, you know, also witnesses aren't supposed to talk to people that are accused, you know, in case there's any issues around evidence. So the criminal court are saying that's not to happen, and the civil court are saying it is. And the criminal court is saying it's so unsafe for you to have any contact with this person that there's bail conditions in place, and the civil court are saying, oh, but you have to go to the place where he is to take the children there. So just really, really conflicting messages, and just, I was listening to everything that you were saying there, Dawn, and just absolutely wishing that there had been that service in place for those children, and still now, with it still going on, do you know that there was somewhere to turn to. Unfortunately, West Lothian isn't one of the areas that we're in, because that sounds absolutely amazing, and I hope it does roll out, you know, across other councils at some point. I'm talking about a bit like what Marsha said earlier. I'm talking about that as one example. It's a particularly bad example, but we see it all the time. It's something that we see happening constantly, as this kind of disjointedness between civil court and criminal court processes, and these children that can end up in the middle of that with their own experiences of domestic abuse, and nobody's listening to what they're saying, and their views are really, really important. Do you know, and I think it's so important that we listen. And ultimately what we have sometimes is children saying they want to have contact, and maybe it isn't safe. But that's when we need to be explaining to children why. You know, we need to explain to children, young people, why something's happening. They need to have information. They need to know when something's been done for their safety, and they also need to be listened to when they don't feel safe. So I think that was mostly what I had to cover. Happy to take any questions or anything in the Q&A at the end. yeah, that's everything that we do. And as I say, happy to share my contact details with anybody that would find that useful or would want them or would like any further information from them in the absence of me having some slides today.